Maybe don't know.
This time, this time, this time, this time, this time to build, 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 this time power, this time to build power, this time to build power, this time to build power.
What's up, everybody? I'm your host, Chris Hampton. Welcome to episode 141 of the Power Company Podcast, brought to you by PowerCompanyClimbing.com. I am back home here in Lander, Wyoming for a month before I have to leave again, which is great. Some friends are going to come and visit to climb. Conditions are starting to get good. My training has been ramped up, and I'm really excited about that. I just got back from Minnesota, and I wanted to say a big thanks and a shout out to the folks over at Escape Climbing for making the visit really educational and for working me half to death. I learned some really great things. The guys at Escape and I created some really cool things that are coming to all of you soon, specifically to home wall users. I think I've made something pretty cool for you. Also to Minneapolis Bouldering Project for having me out and for giving me a platform to speak on while there. I put together a talk about some of the big themes that I've learned in the podcast and wove a narrative throughout that theme. And I'm really proud of how it came out, and I'll be beefing that up a little and hitting the road with it at some point in the future. So be on the lookout for that. Next, I will be at Rocktoberfest in the Red River Gorge. Registration is open now, so go there, do that, and I will see you there. Just before Rocktoberfest, I will be in Murfreesboro, Tennessee at the Performance Climbing Coach Seminar. There are spots remaining open, so you can look right there on your pocket supercomputer, click the link in the show notes, and get registered for that Performance Climbing Coach Seminar. Come and see us. Some of the best coaching minds in the country, period. And I think this thing has gotten really, really good. So you should be there for it. All right, today's episode is a little bit different. It's not as much of a deep dive into a particular subject, but more of me getting to know a friend a little bit better, and a very, very interesting friend. Lee Cujes, who I met in the Red River Gorge. Initially, we recognized each other because of our t-shirts. I was wearing a Power Company shirt. He was wearing an Upskill Climbing shirt, a blog he used to run back then. And this was in the very early days of Power Company Climbing. And we recognized each other and began this what became an online friendship over the years. I saw that Lee was coming back to the Red, and I made a point to make it out there and see him and sit down and chat. And then he and his amazing wife, Sam, talked Annalisa and I into coming to Australia. Over dinner at the Rock House, it all just sort of came to life. Really, this conversation is getting to know someone who is really, really interesting, an amazing climber. And if you aren't following him and you're a moonboard fan, then you most definitely should be. Stick around after the show. I've got a special surprise for Lee and for all of you. Let's get into it.
Maybe don't know.
Me falling off a V4 or falling off a V5 or something on the moonboard, I'm quite happy to post that because it's reality, and I'm getting better, but it's a slow struggle.
This time power. This time to build power. This time to build power. This time.
Anyway, you were continue on that line while I'm kind of getting levels initially. Continue telling me about this 8 to 10 year plateau, because even though that sounds huge, I think a lot of people are actually there, whether they want to admit it or not.
Yeah. And like a lot of us are logging our ticks now. We're putting our ticks in 8a.nu or thecrag.com or one of the online things, and these things they're great for showing you what you've been doing year on year.
Yeah.
And I think that's because, and
that's why I don't look at mine. because if I did, I'd see that I'm on a steady decline right now.
I think you do look at it. I think you look at it. I think you know.
No, I do for sure.
No, I think but that's what keeps you honest. And if we're interested in improving, which most of us are, and it can be maintaining as well.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't have to, it's wherever your mindset is at the time. It's wanting to be able to maintain your level or increase your level. A way to track that over time and look at it and have a really objective view on it, I think is really important. And when I look at mine, I see the world's biggest plateau. It's the biggest straight line that just goes back and back and back. 8, 10, maybe nearly 15 years, I reckon. It's a really long plateau, which I see as being both positive and negative. Positive because, hey, there hasn't been a huge injury in there
right. There's not a big drop off. You're getting older. It's not like this 15-year plateau continues and you don't age.
It'd be nice if there was an age modifier.
That would be great. If I could get that and sell it on my website, that would be perfect.
Yeah. So I think what I'm trying to do with my climbing is I still, I think a lot of us are there where I'm 41 and I'm still thinking, I've got my best days are ahead of me.
Mm-hmm.
I got more to do.
And I think that's a really big, important part of it, right? You have to believe it first. It's not going to happen if you don't believe it. I mean, this shit doesn't just pop out of thin air. It takes work.
Definitely. And I think as you age and as you learn more, you're always making a decision. And I see, I mean, as a young climber, I definitely hung out with I gravitated towards older role model climbers for me. Like it was an apprenticeship system. This is like, we're talking mid-90s. So it was, look at the guys that are doing the stuff that I want to do and hang out with them and emulate them. And they were 20 years older, and I'm still friends and climbing partners with these guys. And you can learn a lot from that.
Yeah.
And that was really critical. That was critical in my development. And I see sort of the way their mindset has shifted as they've gone through their 40s and now 50s, and soon it'll be 60s. For some of these guys, and it's making the decision: do I think my best days are ahead of me, or do I think my best days are behind me, and am I looking to try to maintain? Or if it's not maintained at the highest level, what level do I want to maintain? What do I want to do with my climbing?
What level am I satisfied with?
Absolutely. Is it that decision that if I can't climb at my, at whatever level I think, should I just take up golf?
Right. Golf is way harder than climbing.
I think it is.
Well, here's a question for you. So I think that mentorship situation is, I don't think it's necessarily dying off, though it is getting very diluted, and there's so many more climbers and so many fewer mentors. And that begs the question, how does the video age and Instagram age, social media age mentorship differ? Because when we were coming up, we would see a magazine article, but the only way you ever really got to know the people that you looked up to was by seeing them at the crag, hanging out with them. There wasn't more than that. A lot of people now think they can be connected to a Chris Sharma because they see him doing things all the time, and it seems like, oh, I could learn from what he's doing. And I think in some ways you can, but it also provides this totally false life, that isn't a real thing. And I think that's a tough way to learn. So you see guys like Drew Mack, who we're both friends with. He's doing it the in-person way. He's injecting himself into these situations and learning from people directly, and he has great mentors. What do you think the dangers are for these kids coming up who just see the social media?
Yeah, social media is definitely a hot topic, and I see it
because this is new in your climbing life for both of us. Like, we didn't start in the social media era.
Well, not starting in the social media era. It sort of goes back to not even have, it was pre-internet.
Right.
So as soon as you say pre-internet, it ages us horribly. But at the same time, I'm
going to cut that part out of the podcast.
Yeah, we can fix that in post. The tricky thing was that if the internet was there and we were doing it, because remember, that first 3 years of your climbing, you are so psyched.
Yeah.
You're probably the most psyched you'll be for your whole, because it's all
Totally.
new.
Yep.
Everything's new, and that learning is so fun. And if the internet was available to us, we would have used it. We would have hammered it.
Mm-hmm.
Because you are just hungry for knowledge. You're at that formative time where you just want to. I know that on your shelf there'll be a whole bunch of old rock and ices, and those first
I donated
20
boxes of them to the gym.
You don't need it
in
anymore.
Cincinnati.
No, you can just you're past that. But in your early climbing career, you read those and you could
over and over.
You could memorize them.
I knew which articles were in which cover. I remembered the cover of every magazine, and if I wanted to read an article, I'd know which one it was in by the color of the spine.
There you go. And so that's what we had. And in Australia, of course, we only had the one. We didn't the amount of literature was not as, we didn't have the depth that you have here in the States.
What is the big magazine there?
Well, the big magazine is gone. The big magazine was Rock magazine.
Rock magazine,
yeah,
right.
That was produced for more than 20 years until its gradual demise, as the demise of print, and just like we've seen with some of the mags in the States as well. But yeah, same deal. There wasn't much in the way of information. It was pre-internet, and therefore you were trying to figure stuff out yourself, or you actually had to rely on mentors. So the idea of mentors and the mentorship thing that we think is so important, because we were brought up on that idea, was a necessity, because probably for two reasons. One is it was really difficult to get information any other way. We talk about, guys over here would have had the Royal Robbins, book. That's the one that they were
Basic Rock Craft.
That's the one that they were looking at. And Eric Hurst was just bringing out the first few of his
the How to Climb 512.
Absolutely, that stuff was starting to be produced. That series. There wasn't a lot else available to us, and we relied really heavily on mentorship to give us basic information, and B, at that time, the safe climbing on sport routes was not a thing. Where I was from, there was a few bolts. There wasn't really anything like sport routes in the way that we think of them today, in terms of like where you would climb up with a body length and a half between bolts to a lower off where you could lower to the ground. In the state that I'm from, which is, let's say it's as big as, we're sitting in the Red River Gorge right now, and, the state that I'm from, let's say it's as big as Kentucky, it's probably a bit bigger. There might have been a handful of what we might term sport routes at the time that I started climbing. And if I didn't have that mentorship support at that time, very easy to wander off into a thrill zone and get completely annihilated. And look, we definitely had our share of scary moments in the first few years.
Yep. That's something I've pointed out quite a bit, because I am lucky in the sense that Red River Gorge was close to me when I started climbing, but it isn't, or it wasn't then, the Red River Gorge that we think of now. There were only a handful, fewer than 10 bolted lines under 510. Or 510 and under. There just weren't many easy bolted lines.
That's crazy to think of now, isn't it?
Yeah. So, you had your handful of easy things to learn on, but if you weren't climbing trad routes, which you needed someone teaching you the ways, then, you only had those couple of routes to apprentice on, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, getting back to the point of, because we spoke about mentorship, and now we have this, paucity of mentors that are available. And maybe it's not even that. Of course, there's heaps of people climbing now. There's more people climbing than ever.
Yeah.
So it's not that there's fewer mentors. I suppose what we're seeing is less obvious, tangible, seeing it at the crag, examples of mentorship. What we see now is we see groups of people that are at a similar level that have probably come from a gym environment where we have typically one person, probably similar age to the rest of the group, that has maybe a year more experience than the rest of the group,
right?
Who then by default becomes kind of almost the leader of that group, so it's the little knowledge is a dangerous thing, and he has a little or she has a little bit more knowledge than the rest of the group, and so there is a mentorship, but rather than the mentorship with the depth of knowledge, like a 10 plus year, knowledge. The opposite of deficit, surplus on the rest of the group, the knowledge surplus. Like we've got somebody with a really small knowledge surplus, mentoring the rest of the group. And I'm not saying that it's good or bad. It's what's naturally evolved. I think these days it's what we see. And does it aid progression in the same way that I think the quality of the mentorship probably leads to the quality or the speed of development of the mentee, the person that's being taught.
Yeah.
Because
totally.
there's a lot more that person can point out the pitfalls. I mean, more than anything else, that was the big thing, is like, okay, this is what I did that was wrong. This is the way I trained that got me really injured and gave me chronic elbow and shoulder problems.
Right.
And this is how you could probably avoid that. I mean, those kinds of things. Route selection, the way to move through an area as somebody that lives there, like what you should do,
right?
To and being given those examples, that was all the critical stuff. And now, if we're trying to substitute social media for real life mentors in the flesh, as you said, I see it as being it's a dangerous area to play, because what we're seeing, and like, I don't want to use the same kind of examples all the time, but basically it's very filtered, and we're only really seeing one view of the world for a person. It's a highly curated view, and it's very reductive. So what we see on social media, and look, you're on social media, and
totally.
I'm on social media, and I always have liked to produce content. So I've always liked to, I used to blog a lot and produce guidebooks and.
Do you ever feel conflicted about that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I do, because but at the same time, I absolutely feel conflicted, and at the same time try to, my last little thing that I've been doing is going into my Instagram feed and actively blocking any of the let's call them fake or robot climbing related
I've seen
accounts.
You post those things recently.
Yeah,
it cracks me up.
Well, people are trying to I guess it's, what do you use for example? And I'll use Instagram as an example because I'm on Instagram and I'm not on some of the other platforms, but what do you use that for? Well, I use it to get psyched. I use it to get inspired. I want to see what my friends are doing, and people that maybe aren't my friends but who I look up to because they're doing amazing stuff. And I just want to see what they're climbing.
Right. Totally.
I just want to know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Show me what Seb One, who I don't know, amazing French phenom, he wants to go and do move. He wants to go and do the second ascender move of Adam Ondra's move. I want to know how that's going.
Yeah.
I don't know the guy, but it makes me super psyched.
Yep.
And when I see that, this young guy, I want to get back into the shed and train. That's what I want to use Instagram for.
Yep.
What I don't want to use Instagram for, or have people use Instagram, against me, is to sell climbing t-shirts.
Right.
Using the Korean robot factory farm of Instagram, which are these fake accounts that follow you and then post pictures of of climbing t-shirts.
Right.
That's what I don't want. So the commercialization aspect of Instagram really annoys me, and so I'm super I'm super against it. But of course, I still use it, and I want to share what I'm doing with my with my tribe as well.
Yeah,
you know.
Same here, and I use it also as a commercial platform. Like I'm trying to sell the things that I make, but I also know that I'm giving a lot back to the community and providing them with content that they want. So it's a different thing than the Korean robot factory farm, selling t-shirts. But it does make me feel a little conflicted sometimes.
I think people and using it purely like for somebody like yourself, and I've in the past I had a similar, I ran a coaching business as well, and I definitely used media to promote what we were doing there. And look, there's a lot of positivity that comes, and this is my big thing. I think, we have a choice with everything that we do with media and our engagement with our peers in any, whether that's, interpersonally at the crag or whether that's online. We've got a choice. We can either be negative about something, cut somebody down, take a negative view on somebody's, on the way they conduct themselves or what they might have sent or something like that. Or we can take a really positive view and try and build people up, be positive and creative in the way that we express ourselves and that kind of thing. And I think the easy way out always is to look for the negative. And in the Australian culture, that's definitely the tall poppy syndrome in the Australian culture. And this is not climbing related. This is in the Australian culture, full stop, is very pervasive. So look at who's doing a really, who's at the top of their game, who's doing amazing stuff, and just look for the negative. Try and cut them down. Right. Make yourself feel better. That's very pervasive in the culture. And so and it's the easy way out, and it's very easy to do. Definitely, there was so much of that in the internet forum world. So we're talking.
Oh yeah, I was a part of it.
Yeah.
I definitely was a part of that.
It's the easy thing to do, and I made a conscious decision after being involved in it, and particularly in the forums and that kind of stuff, and just wanting to win forum arguments and that kind of stuff, and did that for a lot of years, and just realized that, ultimately once you've spoken about there's only a few topics you can speak about in climbing. Yeah. And once they've gone round the trap, 3 and 4 and 5 times, and then somebody brings up the idea of bolting at an area again. Yeah. And you just post the URL link and say, just read this. We don't need to do this again. That you make a conscious decision about, all right, I want to make sure that if I'm not saying something nice, I'm not going to say anything at all. Yeah. There's enough people spouting negativity, so I'm going to try and be positive. And I still try to do that today, but at the same time, I'm almost seeing the pendulum swing the other way, meaning that the online world used to be full of haters and negativity, and to an extent it still is. But now what we're seeing, and look at climbing as the sport, there's a lot of fakery. There's a lot of what I would, and positivity that is not genuine to me is as hurtful as outright negativity that is truthful.
I completely agree. And I think it's something of a product of this participation trophy era that, I don't want to just call out the millennials and blame it on them, because I don't think that's the case, but their generation is definitely growing up in this era of everybody gets a trophy, everybody gets a ribbon, and I think that leads to a lot of fake positivity. That, and a lot of these posts that are, it doesn't matter if we fail, it's all about the journey, and while I believe that's true, most of it that you see posted is just fake, and I would love to hear someone be real once in a while and talk about how bad it hurts to fail, and it's not okay with me right now to be failing. I'll get over it, I'll come back and try again, but it did hurt, instead of just it's all flowers and roses and balloons all the time.
Yeah, because and if we tie this to mentorship, I think the slippery slope that we're setting up for ourselves is that these new climbers, they're looking at, they've got their 500, key people that they're following on Instagram, and they're basically seeing that why is my life not stacking up against all I'm seeing is nonstop. It's all A plus.
Yep.
Everything is sends, everything is high fives, everything is traveling, everything is sponsorship. I don't have to work. I'm basically just going from first class airline ticket to first class airline ticket and staying in great digs, not having to do anything and going climbing.
Yep.
And what we got to say is, guys, like that's not what it's like for most people.
Totally.
It's actually really not what it's like for anyone.
Mm-hmm.
There'd be just a couple of people that would have the unbelievable dream lifestyle, and that's in a sport of, however many, hundreds of thousands of participants. It's really not like that. We need a dose of reality.
Yep.
We should use social media for what it's for, and that's for sharing the good and the bad, and not be so reductive, and not be so duplicative, with what we're trying to do, which is, if I'm coming up in climbing, I don't need to copy somebody else's post. I don't need to show that. And that's what we do, because like anything, we identify as climbers. That's great. So we're a big tribe of climbers. We look up to whoever we look up to. And in order to belong, we want to be then producing and posting the same kinds of things that they are. But it doesn't have to be that way. And I think what we're starting to see, and I'm hearing it. I'm hearing it on the podcasts. I'm hearing it with things that you've done in the last 5 or 6 podcasts as well. This idea of authenticity and being real is, people are becoming more wise to that, and people are starting to understand the importance of it. And with some of these athletes that have struggled with this idea in the past, they're now starting to do things to show that they too believe that it is important. So some athletes that have been misunderstood in this area that are now coming out and really showing the community, look, there's flaws to my life, and there's flaws in my climbing resume, and I'm going to look to address that, because that's what I want to choose to do now. And I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I think it's really good. And I think people are, like anything, it takes a while, but I think what people are going to start to see is they're going to start to call out, in the same way that I'm calling out the Korean robots. People are going to start to, and it doesn't have to be vocally calling out people that are posting stuff that they believe are fake, but in the same way that we've got ad block, the ad block, and we that concept of now ad blindness. So people are looking at stuff on their computer, and even if they don't have ad block on, that right sidebar that's popping up with ads, they don't even see it.
Don't even notice it anymore.
You don't even see it.
Yeah.
And on Instagram and on social media, if it's fake, if it's reductive, people are going to start to become wise to it.
Yep.
They're going to have to. And the people that are going to start to be lauded, I think, are the ones that are going to that are showing that they are more real, that they post more of themselves and the good and the bad.
Yep.
They're the ones that are showing probably the kinds of behaviors and qualities that we would more expect with the mentors of old, because they're showing the good and the bad. And when I used to sit in the car for an hour and a half on the way to the cliff with my mentor that I was going out to the cliff with, I wasn't just getting a rosy view of the world. As we conversed for an hour and a half on the way to the cliff, I was getting everything.
Yep.
And that shaped me as a human being. And that was really important, probably more important than actually the time spent at the cliff, was the personal interaction, seeing the good and the bad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just understanding that it's part of this greater life. It's not just this thing on the internet that you see and you go and do on the weekends. It really becomes a part of the people who are investing in it, like you and I have, like your mentors did, like my mentors did. It becomes the key part of their entire life, and everything revolves around it. Their emotions revolve around it. And I think that's I think that's a part that we don't understand through social media, that it's not, like you said, it's not all just sponsorships and first class airline tickets, and all of the challenges in life happen at the same time. So
Absolutely.
It's a tricky subject, and we went way off the path of where we were going to start here, which is totally fine. I love having these conversations, but let's get back to you a little bit. I would love for you to, like, I don't do histories on here generally of people, but I would love for people to have an idea of what your climbing looked like leading up to this 10, 15 year plateau, as you called it. And just so we can know where we're starting. So talk to me about, like, the very brief version of starting climbing, where that was, and what that looked like for those first 15 years or so.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, as I mentioned, was born in Australia. I started climbing around about 18. It was kind of the end of school, beginning of university for me. It's when I started, so it was kind of late compared to some people. But it was at that really formative time when you still, like, that's definitely, I think that end of school, beginning of university is when you're trying to, you're doing all your figuring out stuff. It's when you're very keen on, and a lot of the things that you pick up, I think at that age, stick with you for life.
Yeah.
That's kind of the time where, if it's something that's really important at that time, probably from a values point of view, it's going to stay important for the rest of your life. That's why I think, people, and it's probably less so in Australia, but I definitely see it in America, this idea of professional sports,
right,
where we see so many of these athletes that, and look, they're not lucky enough to get into climbing. They're in these very high impact sports where maybe they're, it's 4 and 5 year career. Really difficult, because I can imagine that completely consumes your life. And
yeah, it has to, I think.
And then it becomes very difficult to break out.
Right.
We are so how lucky are we to get into climbing?
I know, this thing we can do for damn near forever. So
amazing. So
how did you find it? Was it through friends, through? It
was actually my mom took me to a climbing gym.
Cool.
Almost on a whim. I just
at 18.
Yeah, just said. In fact, she got taken. So she got taken to a gym from by one of her friends.
Cool.
And my mum's not that much, like, she had me when she was quite young, so the age gap is not huge for us.
Yep.
So yeah, she got taken to a gym, and she pretty much hated it and said, but I know someone who will really love this. And so at the time I was, standard stuff. I was mountain biking, all the things I still kind of like to do, like fishing, and I ended up doing marine biology as my as my degree. So super psyched on all of the very individual sports based, no team sports.
Yep, same
here. And a lot of those kind of similar traits that a lot of climbers come with. Definitely a propensity for doing things individually and challenging yourself, and rather than up against others and all those kind of things. So climbing fit really nicely, and even from the start, loved it. Wasn't particularly good at it, and really had to just, it was the passion more than anything else. People get into climbing these days, and you see the few really interesting examples where people are climbing at a really high level really quickly. That was not the case for me. And particularly, as we've mentioned earlier, like that idea of information being really hard to come by in the pre-internet days. It was like, well, we made our own harness out of, with a soldering iron and plastic rope. And then we used the same plastic rope to go climbing at the local quarry. This is what we did.
Yeah,
because, none of that, you didn't have any money and none of the information was available. So you just tried to figure stuff out yourself. And, we managed to survive that first experience until someone, thank you, mentor number one, who rolled in and said, "Oh, guys, you're going to kill yourself. Here, have some," and it happened to be the guy that, worked at the local climbing shop, managed to squirrel away, 45-foot piece of rope. Here you go. You can try not to kill yourself and do some top belays on this thing. And, so for those first couple of years, it was, yeah, it was climbing at probably, I'm going to say like a, I have to do the conversions, but like a 5, 6, 5, 7 level for like the first 3 years of climbing.
Right.
Yep. So a really, quite a, I'll use the term modest level. Remembering there were no sport routes.
You did just hear the episode with Drew Mack where he said 514 were moderates, right?
The moderates. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure you'd heard that.
Just remember, climbing is a diverse sport. There may be cultural differences as well. So yeah, the first few years it was a struggle. No true in terms of take you out, come climbing with me mentor that didn't exist at that point. And probably if we fast forward to about probably 5 or 6 years into climbing, it's when probably, and I'm talking maybe we're at a 510 BC kind of level of climbing is where I was at, and that's when I managed to, and I don't even remember how it happened, but I managed to get and treat it as the invite from the local hard man.
Yep.
Would you like to come out to the pulpit? And the pulpit, for anyone that lives in Queensland, is this very small crag, 50 routes. But it's on private land. It can be, and now it's changed hands a couple of times, and it's still difficult to access. But it's the Hardman Cliff, and there were the routes there up to 13C, 13D, that kind of thing, and like that, which was just astronomical, and for me at that time, and that became that one invite. And the subsequent 7 years of going there nearly every weekend with the same crew of motivated locals was the thing that allowed my climbing to transform into pretty much what it is today, from like just running around like a chicken with your head cut off with really no idea, no direction.
Yeah. I think that's a huge part of progression that a lot of people completely skip over and miss, and frankly, I think that the people who are those, I want to take everyone out and I want to show everyone how to climb, and I've got this delusion of grandeur about my own climbing, I think those people are some of the worst at holding people back. Those initial mentors for people, if you don't choose wisely who your mentors are, if you just say, oh, I'm just going to go climbing with whoever, then I think it can very quickly become the person leading the group and always wanting to be the expert can hold everyone back. It's when you find that group of people like you found taking you out to the pulpit who genuinely want to see you progress and don't care if you, in fact, maybe want to see you progress past them. I think that's the group you have to hold on to, and it can be tough to know what that group is.
That's a challenge. Like that, all those things that you mentioned, that's all really real as well. Because as soon as it's getting to a stage where maybe you and that kind of uncomfortable position where it's looking like is the student going to outpace the teacher? Right. That's uncomfortable. It is. And it can be uncomfortable for both parties, I think.
Absolutely.
The person coming up they're really psyched and it's looking like they're going to do really well. And it's obviously uncomfortable it can be uncomfortable for the teacher as well, who probably held the position as the local, hard man, and I use that term asexually, hard man, hard girl, doesn't really matter, for some number of years. And I think that's that's definitely tricky, and that was tricky for me as well. And then after, and I suppose where you were going with this is speaking about this big plateau, which I mentioned, this 10 plus year plateau. I think being exposed to the same group of people, because the Queensland climbing community at that time, so the state that I was in, it's a really small number of people. Great climbing, really, really good quality climbing, very diverse, lots of different rock styles and types, leading to you could go strap knee pads on, and once we figured out what those were, we had to almost invent them. Basically, it was before all of the current crop, but we've got great cave climbing there, and you've got that, and then you had amazing slab routes and multi-pitches and everything in between. So there was good variety. It wasn't like we were climbing the same stuff. So that was good as it's great to have variety early in your career.
Right.
And that's really cool. But there was a small amount of people, and I think that idea of training knowledge and wanting to improve. So I could do what my mentor did, which was, and I can say it was heavily circuit based. So, doing endurance circuits and stuff like that. Got him to where he got to. I emulated that. That's what I knew, and it got me to where to that basically around that kind of 13D-ish kind of level around there, and then around there is when everything just started to kind of level out.
Yep.
You can only do the same, and we're talking really. 7 years of progressive training, but of a very similar stimulus,
right?
For a long time, and the gains were great. Going from a high 510 to into the 513 kind of level was terrific. That's fantastic. But then you kind of stay there.
Right.
You don't change it up, and so I mean, only in the last since then have got into even back then was very into bolting routes, and even really early in my climbing career I was really interested in first ascents and doing new things, and so it meant, okay, well, if I've climbed out this particular area, which is where it kind of got to, okay, let's start bolting new areas to try to broaden the climbing horizon, I guess.
Yeah.
And that was that in and of itself, bolting, I don't know how Danny Andrade does it.
Oh man,
it's really hard.
It's hard work.
You don't, if you do it for a long time, you don't actually get stronger. You get weaker because you're really trashed, and it makes it hard to train and hard to recover.
Yeah.
So to do it year in, year out, and just bolting new routes at the rate that guy does, and I know there's a lot of guys like him, but I put him on a bit of a pedestal because he's bolted so many routes and still done so many thousands of routes over 8A.
Yeah.
It's just incredible that he can maintain the rage. But I always think about him when I'm hanging on a rope in a cave with my abs screaming, just thinking, it's going to take me 3 days to recover from this. Mm-hmm. That could have been 3 days that I could have spent quality training.
Yep, exactly.
But, getting into bolting and doing that kind of stuff was, that was really beneficial, and I saw it as a creative way to, further, my own climbing, as well as like open up things for the community as well, and that was great. And then in the last kind of 3 years, it was, all right, let's make a decision. I've been in this, let's call it big fish in a small pond type scenario where I feel like I've climbed most of the things that I can climb in my state. Let's change it up. Let's just get dropped into a really big pond. And we picked up and moved like 3 years ago and to the Blue Mountains, which is, Australia's answer to the Red River Gorge, basically. We've got 5,000 or 6,000 routes all within 35 minutes of the door, and it's completely hit the reset switch for my climbing and my mindset.
Yeah. Was that the main reason that you moved? Was that the driving factor?
100%. It was literally the decision that I love climbing. I love climbing as much now as I did 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But it is becoming increasingly difficult to come up with new ways to entertain myself and progress and do what I want to do. And I feel like, we were getting to the stage where we were actually driving 2.5 hours one way every weekend. That's a single drive into the next state in order to bolt and develop routes.
Right.
For 2 years we did that. And so you zombies, you rock into work on Monday morning. It's a great feeling, isn't it? When you Monday morning meeting, people who are listening to this, they know what I'm talking about. The Monday morning meeting, like people that you kind of looking around the room and there's just a couple of people with their eyes completely glazed, and you know that they don't even drink. Like, what have these guys been doing? Like, they are absolutely slaughtered. I was one of those guys.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a total zombie. Monday, Tuesday, I'm ruined. My boss knew it was great. Like, I work for a guy who is a climber himself.
So he understood.
He understands. He's like, I know what you've been doing. You're absolutely destroyed.
Yeah.
And so, it got to the stage where it's like, look, we got to sit down and figure out, me and my wife Sam, where do we want to be? Do we stay here and or do we completely change it up? You know, one of those fundamental life decisions. And look, you know, there's lots of different ways to play it. You know, it's change the job or hashtag van life or, you know, there's so many ways to play it. And that decision, you know, it's a really critical one, and you only make, you know, a handful of those in your life about like, where do you want to be? What do you want to do? That was one of those fundamental ones. But the driver that you asked was definitely driven from climbing.
Yeah, that's really cool. And that's, you know, that's one of those things I was talking about where you don't get to see those kind of agonizing decisions on the social media. And, you know, if your mentor is going through that, or if you are a mentor to someone else going through it, then they get to see it, or you get to see it, whichever way that it happens. And I think that's really important. Do you ever feel like you did it all backwards, that you should have spent more time bouldering hard when you were younger, less time doing endurance work, and that would be more beneficial for you? Have you ever?
I do now. I actually do. Yeah.
Only because I just said it, or
no? I've been thinking about it for a while.
Like, God, you just totally destroyed me.
No, I'm always amazed when I look at if I wanted pure, you know, if I look at my climbing now and I wanted to, you know, I've got certain goals that I want to achieve and certain routes that I want to do, and I think I'd be able to do those routes, you know, more quickly and more effectively. I think there's two ways to approach climbing. One is that and people move through the different zones of climbing. Like I've got this big, you know, in my formative years, it was trad climbing because it had to be. Mm-hmm. And then I moved into a big base of sport climbing and almost no bouldering. Training, yes.
Yep.
So
we have parallel lives here.
We do.
You just have a way cooler accent.
It plays well here and not at home.
I just want to use the word 13 because I say it like that, but you say 13.
13.
13.
Yeah.
I want to
and
say
I'm
it
trying
like
to. I'm actually trying to moderate my my accent somewhat, just so that I can be understood, without putting on the proper Aussie.
I'm going to come to Australia just so
slang.
I can hear the real thick Australian Lee accent.
Yep. Although being here in Kentucky, like we get to you know, I can travel around the States and get different accents, but I must say I love, you know, it's just fantastic. I feel like I'm getting a really immersive experience here.
Yeah, definitely.
What were we talking about?
We were talking about, I just had
Bouldering, yeah.
Bouldering, yeah.
So what I see now, and you tell me if you think this is accurate, there are two ways to approach climbing. One is to come in with definitely a roots focus. So you want to climb, you know, you go into the gym, you're climbing a lot of roots. You're not doing heaps of bouldering. And then you go outside and you climb a lot of roots. You're not doing a heap of bouldering. You're doing some training. But you're mostly focused on climbing roots. And there's positives to that. Yep. And I could start to list them off. And I'd say things like engrams, and I'd say things like technique, and I'd say things like headspace, mental game.
Tactics.
Yeah, there's so many cool things that you pick up coming from climbing or approaching climbing routes with that frame or that backdrop. The other way to approach it is to get really beastly strong bouldering. So you're and then start to interleave or fold route climbing into a base of bouldering.
Yep.
And I see, well, I mean, a great example, and I've got lots of examples, but like the one that stuck out was when Nale Hakataival went and climbed Silbergeier in the Radicon.
Yeah.
In
the
not very...
exact opposite of what he does on boulders.
The exact opposite. And not only that, and of course he's now done things on our very famous Taipan wall. And if you guys haven't, or you don't know what Taipan wall is, I suggest you Google up some photos of
photos.
Yeah, you need to see this. It's basically...
it's one of my dream locations.
Yeah, it's one
2020, that's the plan. Awesome.
We'll see you there because it's one of the world's top 5 walls anywhere in the world. So think Rockland stone, but you know, and I can't do maybe 200 feet high or something along those lines. It's just amazing. 3 pitches high, Rockland stone. 100 roots, fantastic. Anyway,
so good.
And he's done, you know, he's gone and done, you know, 9A plus type roots that are now sitting there on the Taipan wall. And this is a guy that just goes and stacks pads and does high balls and goes bouldering and pulls really hard moves, but he's by no means is he a route climber, but it just shows. And look, Jimmy Webb's done similar, Daniel Woods has done similar, and a lot of local heroes in Australia are now doing similar, coming from a bouldering focus, and really just coming out to the hardest routes of the area and crushing them very quickly. Whereas somebody with a roots background, it's the idea of the pyramid. I'm going to do all the routes at this level before I'm going to do another route at the next level, and then I'm going to build this pyramid. That's a very, look, you know, the pyramids, they're still standing today. They took a long time to build. My pyramid's taken me a long time to build. Has it been super beneficial in helping me reach the highest of highs? Well, probably not. But, you know, look, I'm not injured. I've got a really good background of not being injured. I think the bouldering way might be potentially risky unless you you know, if you're just, and what I'm talking about, I guess, is I definitely think it's possible, and I'm seeing it where people are coming into climbing, bouldering exclusively, and basically climbing really, you know, at nationally elite levels within 3 and 4 years. This is what I'm seeing, like on a rope. So they're coming straight out of the gym, just bouldering all the time. Usually young guys and girls, quite young, quite light, and they're just getting on a rope and tearing it up. And I find it very, very inspirational.
Totally.
And do I think that might have been a better way to go for myself? Maybe, but I got to tell you, I think climbing is all about psych. So what are you most psyched for? What are you super keen for? If I'm flicking through Instagram and when I see a picture of a boulder, unless it's really massive, I just flick past it. I don't even care, and that's because personally, I'm not super psyched on bouldering. I never have been. The thing that gets me about climbing is typically, if I, you know, think about all the early things that really, you know, made me super psyched about climbing, it was the idea of exposure. It was the idea of height. It was the idea of feeling air, airiness, and being in an exposed and cool position. These were the things that really psyched me about climbing, you know, early on, and it stayed with me now. So I love climbing it. Typically, if I have a short route or a long route, what am I going to pick? I'm going to pick the long route. That's because hopefully it puts me in a cooler position, something that makes me feel, you know, a certain way. And so, but the odd thing is that, you know, and we train, we get on the moon board, we do hard moves. I get completely psyched on that. But when I'm doing that, I'm thinking, wouldn't it be really awesome if this was 120 feet up a route? That's what I'm thinking. So I get completely psyched on bouldery movement, but I want it to be on a route. If you just put a foot off the ground, suddenly I'm not psyched. It just seems boring to me. And that's a complete, I realize what I'm saying. I realize it doesn't make sense.
No, I get it.
But it simply is. That's just kind of how my brain's wired. So, and somebody said to me just before I came away that, and we'd been talking and conversation much like this one, like looking at each other's weaknesses and figuring out what we wanted to do for the sort of the coming 6 months of training, which I think is really beneficial because as a self-coached climber, it's really hard sometimes, I think, to zero in on your weaknesses. And to have somebody looking at it from a external perspective, I think is really helpful. And he said to me that he believed that my bouldering potential was, because I always just say, I'm just a crappy boulderer, I can't boulder, you know, I can't pull hard moves. And he said that he said, I believe your bouldering potential is completely unexplored. That was the phrasing he used. And it's probably true.
That's a really great way for him to say it too. Instead of just saying, you need to boulder more, you think you suck at it, but maybe you don't. Maybe saying it that way sounds much more adventurous and exciting.
It was a nice way to put it, and it just, because it puts the challenge back on, or the onus back on me. To say, okay, well, you don't know. Chances are, you're not going to find out that you're a V12 boulderer overnight.
Right.
But you don't know. You don't know where your 3-month potential is. You don't know where your 6-month or 12-month potential is for pulling hard moves. You don't know that. You know what you do in a context of training. You know what you do on the moon board. But even that to me is very, I put a moon board in my house when we moved recently, and I did it primarily for doing exactly what we're talking about, which is forcing me to do something that I wouldn't do myself by choice. Because for me at this point, and I think for anybody that has, let's even just use the, 6 to 10 years of training under that, somebody that's been in climbing for a little while, I think the enemy is routine. This is what I'm learning for myself. The enemy is routine. So if you've been doing it for a while, chances are it's probably the enemy. Try to do something that you wouldn't naturally gravitate towards. Try to change the training stimulus. This is what I'm trying to tell myself. And the other big thing for me is rest. I'm so psyched.
Yep. Especially bouldering more, rest becomes even more important. And because it's not the stimulus you're used to, It's tricky. It's interesting to me that how parallel our lives have run, because I am very much the person who loves the showdown at the chains. I want the hardest moves right before the chains. And I love that. That gets me so excited. But I did a few years ago really come to grips with the fact that I'm terrible at doing really hard moves right off the ground. And part of it is that I'm just not stoked to do hard moves off the ground and then glory jugs to the top. Just not stoked on that. But what if it were hard moves off the ground, continuous hard moves, and then another showdown at the chains? That would be really exciting to me. And so I started working more and more on that, and that's led me into the idea, the realization, and through talking to Nate quite a bit about my training and his training, and realizing that the same thing, that my bouldering potential is unexplored. I really haven't spent much time trying hard boulders. I've touched one V11, I've done several V10s, but touched one V11. That's it. And so my new goal for myself is V12, just to see how far I can push into that.
As a route climber, do you find how do you go with if you're setting yourself a big goal like that? How do you find when you're packing in day after day, like you're going back to the project, back to the V11, back to the V12 day after day? How do you find your psych levels?
I don't know yet. I've not spent that much time on a boulder, or I've really only been on a couple of bouldering trips longer than a week, so.
I've been on 0 bouldering trips longer than a week.
Yeah, see, all unexplored here.
It's unexplored.
So it's exciting to me that there's this whole new area of climbing that I haven't explored. And part of that seems like low-hanging fruit, like, oh, I could really get better at this, and that's going to improve my overall climbing. And part of it is just excitement for this new adventure and learning new tactics and learning new ways to structure your day and things to pay attention to. And it's just like starting all over again.
And like we said, like that can be, if you're psyched for that, that can be the most exciting time.
Yeah.
That formative, when you're still learning how to do all that stuff and coming into it with, hey, look, at least you don't have to, you know how to climb things. So you're not coming in completely green.
Yeah.
You can take what you know, which is a certain amount, and now overlay it with all this new stuff. How to boulder hard. It's exciting, but it'll be and I'll be watching with interest how you go with this.
Yeah.
And for myself, it would need a mental switch, which is yet to happen, but I'm not ruling it out because I think it might be important. Like I think that for myself, that
I'm going to keep pushing you in that direction. It would be fun to have you over in Australia trying the same things.
We could try and parallel something. It'd be kind of cool because it sounds like we're kind of in a similar boat there.
Yeah, and one of the things that really cemented this for me, I started to have this inkling a couple of months ago that maybe I could climb harder. Maybe I could climb harder boulders, and if I can do that, then that might lead to harder routes, especially around lander where oftentimes the hardest moves are right off the ground, and I have a really difficult time with that. But I started looking online to see if I could find people who had done their first V12 after 40, and I'm sure there's someone out there. I don't know who they are. I can't find any evidence of it.
Tell us, people.
Yeah, my guess is it's out there. But I did find a lot of chatter on those internet forums, people saying, no way, can't be done. If you haven't climbed V12 by 40, you're never climbing V12. And these are experienced boulderers saying this. And I'm like, I don't think that's true.
Red rack to a bull.
Yeah. So that cemented it for me. That was like, okay, now you've got to put some effort into this.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Everyone loves to chat. I mean, why do we don't climb because it's easy?
Right. Not at all. Not even in the slightest. And that's part of the reason I wanted to talk to you in general, was because I love seeing you put these moonboard videos up. You're the only person I will ever say I love watching your moonboard videos, just so you know.
I know how much you hate them.
No one will ever hear that come out of my mouth again. But I love that you put those up, and you don't just put up the sins. You put up the moonboard struggles, and
I put up the failures on the low grade problems.
Yeah,
that's what. And in fact, all my harder sends, which are not hard, most of those don't go up. What I find, I want to put up the reality. We just talked about this stuff. I want to put up stuff because I know when people get on moonboard, and I know some good climbers, particularly and we're talking like route climbers that don't boulder, that pretty much can't do. These are good climbers. So these are like 13C climbers that can't do anything on the moonboard.
Right. Like
can barely pull off the mat.
Right.
So I'm quite happy to show that, I'm around that level route climber. Me falling off a V4 or falling off a V5 or something on the moonboard, I'm quite happy to post that because it's reality. Like
right. Totally.
And I'm getting better. It's I've been doing it for a while now. I think I got it done 800 or 900 problems or something on the board.
Nice.
I'm getting better, but it's a slow struggle, and I'm really I'm all too happy to show my show all my weak areas in my climbing, and it's some people a lot of people would just skip past it. More moonboard videos, I want to see that, but some people are really. And I think it's heartening for climbers because there's a lot of climbers out there. Like, I'm going to say, there's a lot of climbers that are going to boulder way stronger than me on the moonboard, but they probably look at my climbing and the routes that I send and go, wow, this guy's fallen off this V5 on the moonboard, which I can do up and down barefoot and whatever. But he's climbing this climb that's way outside. So it shows the amazing sport that climbing is.
Totally.
You don't necessarily. There's amazingly, let's use the term weak people that can get up what would be considered really hard routes. How do they do it? Tactics. Finessing their way through things. You don't have to have. There's so much focus at the moment on things like. There always has been, but more so with things like, there's a lot of profiling tools out there now for things like for finger strength and how much of your body weight can you hang off an edge and on a single hand and all these things, these profiling metrics. And look, I'm a geek, so I find that stuff really interesting.
Yeah, totally.
And I'm really interested in it, and you'll see me do some of that stuff, and I'm because I'm trying to find my own weaknesses and try to attack those. But at the same time, what a lot of the research is saying, a lot of people that are putting together these numbers, is that the 513 climbers are posting up similar numbers than the 514, 515 climbers.
Yep.
This is what we're seeing. So in general, you're not seeing a linear progression of strength against routes sent or the difficulty of routes sent. We are not seeing that.
Yep.
So there is an X factor.
Yep. There are these factors that aren't being measured or can't be measured, or I don't know. I mean, maybe they can someday be measured, but right now we're not able to measure those things. They're just things that you've learned and cultivated, throughout years of climbing. Some people do it very quickly. They learn great tactics quickly. Some people, like me, it takes me 3/4 of my climbing career. But
I guess what it does for me is it gives me heart that there isn't a one-size-fits-all
Right.
approach
Absolutely.
to progression.
Yeah.
This is why people like you and your profession in terms of coaching and offering guidance to climbers exist, because we can't just simply publish a paper. We can't simply put out a PDF that says this is the way to do it.
Right.
You can put out a PDF that says this is our way that worked for this guy.
Yep.
Or this girl. This is it. And it really does give me heart that people can approach it from all sides. They can come to route climbing from bouldering. They can go to bouldering from route climbing. Sorry, guys, if you're doing that, you're in trouble. But you know what I mean. You can really approach it from different ways, and the training aspect and the way you progress is not going to follow necessarily a standardized approach in the way that, for example, it might with somebody like a track and field athlete or a swimmer. It's not going to be that. It's a skill sport. It's more complex than that. And the sport rewards these X factors, like, I'll put the quotes up, try hard. That idea of trying hard, it's very hard to, and mental strength on a route is something that you cannot put a price on.
Yeah.
And people with their, these who might be posting up, if they go through these profiling processes, with one of these companies that are out there and get profiled, and they might have really weak numbers. The numbers might be telling a certain story. Well, guess what? Their scorecard's telling another because they got something else.
Right.
They're trying really hard. They're laying it all down on the rock. They're putting 100% in, and they can do it. And look, we sometimes have those sends, and people listening will have had those sends where they put in 100, and it leaves you it feels amazing, and you send, and you say to yourself, why can't I do that every route?
Right.
And for me personally, like, I want to do it every route. I find it so mentally taxing and exhausting to do that on a big pitch, to lay it all down, to leave nothing behind, that it only ever comes out, maybe it comes out a few times a season. And those are magic moments, and it's why we climb. Wouldn't it be amazing if we had the tools to cultivate that? And
Right.
some of us are lucky enough that naturally it comes out nearly every time we tie in. Those are the guys and girls that they got something.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I think that's a pretty good place to wrap it up. I think that's the best advice for any person who's coaching themselves, is try and cultivate that mental toughness, that try hard, and understand your own climbing and where the weaknesses in your game are, instead of just where the weaknesses in your body are. I think that's huge.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. I appreciate it.
See you next time.
Oz 2020.
I'll be there.
All right. Turned out Oz 2019 was more appropriate. Like I said, Lee and Sam talked us into it. It wasn't very difficult. Going over there and hanging out with them seemed like a really, really fun thing to do. And I'm incredibly glad that I did, and that I had more time to sit down and talk to and get to know and philosophize with Lee. He's got a really great outlook on not only progression in the sport, but progression through following what you're most stoked on. It's really easy to look at the way that coaches like myself or that other athletes have said, here's the best way that worked for me. Here's what you need to do to get to this level. But instead of just following that blindly, Lee has said, here's what I'm really psyched on doing. Here's what keeps me really motivated, keeps me really happy. And I'm going to do that and continue to try to progress in that. And he's done that. I got to belay him on his first rifle 13A on-site just recently, actually, when they were in the States visiting rifle. And Lee, as a gift, a congratulatory gift for your rifle 13A on-site, the next episode, even though I'm not done with all of the Oz episodes, there are a few more to come. Even though I'm not done, the next episode is going to be Ravioli Biceps, Moonboard Champion of the World, just for you. So for all of you out there, go follow Lee on Instagram, especially if you're a moonboard aficionado. Follow his stories, constant moonboard posting in there. He's now got both moonboard setups in his garage. Absurd, really. But I know the kind of frothers all you moonboard people are. So go do it. And if you want to know more about Lee and his history in Australia, which stretches way back and includes a host of FAs in a bunch of different areas, a couple of FAs I got to do with him in Australia while we were there in the Blue Mountains. Anyhow, there is a great episode over at Baffle Days with host Tom O'Halloran. You should definitely go check that out. And I know that he recently recorded an Enormocast with host Chris Kalous, so be on the lookout for that soon as well. In the meantime, until this Ravioli Biceps episode comes out, you can find us at powercompanyclimbing.com, on the Facebook, on the Instagram, at Power Company Climbing, and you can search for us on the Twitter. You're not going to find us because we don't tweet, we scream like eagles.
This time,